The Federal and SR Public Welfare Trust present the Pudukkottai Marathon 2025. This event is co-presented by Rupee Apex Group of Companies on Sunday, August 3.
Hello, federal viewers. Starting tomorrow, the UK is raising salary thresholds for skilled worker visas, making it harder for professionals to stay, even as the country heavily relies on their expertise. Joining us today is Dr. James Parkhurst, a structural biologist at the Rosalind Franklin Institute, and he's going to join us today to tell us the human cost of these policies. So, James, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. So, can you tell us, from a policy perspective, what do you think is driving the government's decision to raise salary threshold, particularly when it's dependent in sectors like health, research, and academia on international talent? Do you think these thresholds reflect an economic logic, or is it more of a political gamble aimed at reducing net migration figures?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me on. From my perspective, I think that these changes don't necessarily reflect an economic logic, because it's a well-established fact amongst economists that immigration is one of the best drivers of economic growth. So it's been previously published that if the world were to adopt a more open immigration system, it could add tens of trillions of dollars onto the global economy. So it should be understood in the context that trying to reduce immigration is going to dampen any potential economic growth. So you kind of need to understand, why would a country want to reduce economic growth? And so I think that it's an element of the kind of politics of the country. And in the UK, we have an ascendant far right party that is, I think, the mainstream parties have a lot of fear of. And I think that part of the aim of making a harsher immigration policy is to try to reduce the amount of blame that this party will put on the kind of mainstream parties like Labour and Conservatives, because they will always want to reduce the number of immigrants. But I think that the thing is, this is not going to work, because no immigration policy, regardless how harsh, is going to placate the far right. And so if mainstream parties keep adopting more and more harsh immigration policies, it's not going to reduce the problem of the far right. It's only going to increase it, because it will make the issue of immigration front and center, and so that's my perspective in terms of the economics of the situation.
Right, got that. And can you also tell us about public healthcare? I believe 36% of NHS doctors are non-UK nationals, and Indian nationals alone make up about 8% of the entire doctor workforce, by far the largest group. So given this deep reliance on migrant professionals to keep the NHS running, even in terms of paramedics and nurses, how do you reconcile this with the government's steadily rising barriers for the very people it depends on?
Well, this is actually a big topic of discussion in the UK, because over particularly the last decade, we've had there have been real kind of issues in health and social care as a result of long-term underfunding, and there are frequent headlines about the NHS being on its knees, and frequent crises, and anyone in the UK can see how the kind of services have been kind of cut back over this time. And you're absolutely right to point out that migrant doctors and nurses and care workers form really a crucial, important part of our health service. The NHS is one of the largest employers in the world, and has been able to attract skilled doctors and nurses and care workers from across the world, which has been an amazing thing for our healthcare system. And so I don't believe that there is necessarily, as I tried to say, like, not really a strategy in terms of trying to reduce the amount of immigration. There's not necessarily like a good outcome that is being hoped for. It's more that the policy is designed to be harsh, so that it's for the sake of being harsh. For example, an example of this is that Theresa May called her immigration policy the hostile environment policy, You don't call your policy something like that unless you want to be seen to be tough on something. So I think that the needs of the healthcare system have been put into a secondary place with regards to, let's say, the political need to appeal to the media and to be seen to be reducing immigration, because immigration is kind of treated as a problem rather than being a good thing.
Right. And also, would you say the backlog of cases has increased rather than decreased post-COVID? Would that be your
Um,
reality?
so I'm not in the healthcare system myself, but my impression from reading the news is that would be the case. Yeah.
I want to refer back to the letter you wrote to The Guardian, where you describe visa fee hikes and the NHS surcharge as a kind of poll tax. Can you expand on that? How do you see these costs affecting the political agency and economic dignity of migrants?
Well, so I referred to this as a kind of poll tax because a poll tax is typically a flat rate tax which a person is required to pay simply for existing, and so these visa administration fees, in particular the NHS surcharge, they are things which are the visa fee administration fee in the UK is about 10 times that of other European countries. So you're not paying for a service. You are paying essentially kind of a tax. And the thing is that immigrants do not have the right to vote, so are unable to vote to reduce this. So it's an easy win for politicians. They can just up the value, up the cost of this, and very few people will vote against it because the people directly affected, have no say in it. And the thing is that in terms of the political agency and economic dignity of migrants, we often have conversations in the press about criticizing, let's say, Qatar or Middle Eastern countries because migrant workers need to pay a large fee to get a job, and just to get the job, to work, for example, in the World Cup, it was highly reported. But our immigration system is no different. Migrants need to pay a significant chunk of their salary just to have the right to work in the UK, and that does not. They're not getting anything for that, because, for example, the visa costs are split into the NHS surcharge and the administration fee. Thing is that the NHS surcharge, so in the UK, healthcare is paid through taxation. So if you are working, you are funding healthcare exactly the same as a British citizen. So I think that it's an extra tax because you're simply not receiving an additional service. And I think that what's more, it's you're kind of stuck if you receive a job that you're sponsored for, you've got a visa sponsored by that organization. You may feel then that you cannot leave that job because your life in the UK depends on you having that job. So you're open to being abused.
Okay, so you could be exploited also at your
Exactly.
workplace. And what about your work at the Rosalind Franklin Institute? Because you're at the cutting edge of structural biology, developing stimulation tools and advanced imaging software. So given how international the field is, what has been the impact of UK's tightening visa regime in terms of recruitment, collaboration, and long-term research in your lab and beyond? So do you think the UK will be losing out to other countries if they make it harder for the world's brightest to stay?
I mean, so in my particular field, as a scientist, you're right, absolutely right. Getting the best and brightest is, one of the kind of critical aspects of maintaining the competitiveness of the British life sciences field. And so inevitably, if we try to make it more difficult for people to come and work here in the sciences, then it's going to reduce our competitiveness. I think that's something which is a big concern to a lot of people in my field. But so I can in my workplace, I'm an elected representative for postdoctoral research associates. And one of the things that's been a big topic of discussion is that essentially foreign postdocs are struggling with these visa fees because one aspect is that, you know, when you come to work for like a British research institution or a university, you may have you know, all the fancy degrees, but you may not be paid actually that much, because people come to work in these research institutions because they want to, you know, better their career, and they accept like a lower salary than maybe you could get in industry, just because of the, you know, the thrill of doing science, and also, you know, the, you know, maybe getting a good university on their CV. So the thing is that
Right.
if you have, for example, a partner and a couple of children, these fees can quickly add up to thousands of pounds a year, which can take up, you know, let's say 10% of your salary after tax, which is, you know, a huge amount. So, you know, so this is a real issue. The thing is that in my workplace, the employer will pay for the administration costs, but not for the NHS surcharge, which is the largest chunk. So it's really, you know, having an effect on the people currently working there. And, you know, I think that people who, if they were to do their research before coming to the UK and realize how much things cost, would definitely think twice, I think.
Okay. Okay, so it's like they didn't have forewarnings and they landed up like they thought passion could drive their future, and then they realized, oops, there's something more. So the
Well, yeah,
justification often the justification, you know, often given for salary threshold is to ensure migrants aren't undercutting local workers or burdening the public purse. But then
mm,
from your letter, I have come to understand that migrants already contribute more than they could receive. So can you walk us through that mismatch between perception and data when it comes to migrant contribution?
sure. Well, it's your question actually, I think, highlights the kind of the classic paradoxical prejudice, that migrants are simultaneously undercutting local workers and taking their jobs, but actually at the same time being a burden. And, you know, these two things cannot be the same, right? You know, migrants can't both take your job and also, you know, be lazy and a burden, right?
Yes.
So it should also be said that migrants in the UK are not allowed to claim for benefits. So if you're on a working or spouse visa, you cannot claim out of work benefits. And so, you know, migrants pay more tax than they cost, and also, what's more, they pay on average more tax than an average British citizen. So the thing is that, you know, migrants have never been a burden. When it comes to undercutting local workers, I think that possibly there is a case to say that could happen, because, for example, many employers, particularly those in sort of seasonal agricultural work, may use kind of migrant work to you know, pay lower salaries, right, or lower wages. And I think that definitely is an issue that should be addressed. Because first of all, it exploits migrants, as well as you know, not, you know, it obviously then causes resentment amongst those people who may want to have those jobs. But who's to blame for this? Is it the migrant looking for work like anyone else, or is it the business that is, you know, exploiting those migrants and paying too low? I think that if you want to you know, improve the salaries and wages of people, you know, why use the kind of the sledgehammer of immigration policy when actually you can make more targeted regulation of those industries, or raise the minimum wage, which will have an actual direct impact on those wages. So I agree that certainly in some cases migrant labor may be used to undercut locals, but I think that using immigration policy to address that is going around a very kind of circuitous route, when you can address this directly by regulating those industries better, or raising the minimum wage.
Sure. And, just to point out the hypocrisy of this is not in the UK, but in the US, Donald Trump apparently hired a whole lot of migrant laborers for for Mar-Lago. So that shows how, like if it's going to benefit them, like politicians will take a short route if it saves them costs in any way, and also gives them, the public platform to say, hey, I'm against immigration, but like, forget what's going on in my backyard.
I
So
think that
coming
you're
back to you, yes?
go on. I'm just going to say, I think you're absolutely right that in some cases the
Mm.
migrant policy is not even designed to work. It's just designed to look harsh. And a good example of this is the UK Rwanda policy, where we were
Okay.
sending refugees to Rwanda. It was never going to work to reduce the number of refugees, but
Mhm.
um, it's designed to look harsh. And I think it's the same as what you were pointing out in the US.
Right. So coming back to something personal, I understand your highly accomplished wife spent like 13 years navigating the UK's immigration system, from an international student to a researcher to your fiancé and then to the spouse visa. But she still apparently does not have the indefinite right to remain in the UK. So can you share what that journey has been like for both of you in terms of financially, emotionally, professionally?
Yeah, well, it's been a long journey, as you just highlighted. As well, I should say that my wife, she has a bachelor's and master's degree from her home country, as well as having a master's and a DPhil from one of the best universities in the UK.
Wow,
Um,
that's like a lot.
so, so yeah,
Highly
she's
accomplished, no
really
doubt.
accomplished. And after 13 years, still doesn't have the right to live in the UK. I think that this is because, as well as being expensive, the visa system is the rules are quite complicated, and so you have to make sure that you abide by certain conditions to be able to apply after a certain period of time, and that's actually kind of difficult if you're, let's say, a high-flying academic who's collecting data in different countries and things like this. So I don't want to count the amount that we've actually spent on UK visa fees, but it's way beyond £10,000. And in terms of the financial impact of that, we could have put that money towards buying a house, which is also incredibly expensive in the UK. We could have put that towards having anything you can imagine putting your savings towards, like that £10,000 makes a real difference to us, because, as I alluded to, academics maybe have nice jobs, but we don't necessarily get paid a lot, and we live in a very expensive city.
Mm.
I think that the beyond all of this, though, there's a feeling of precariousness, because 13 years is a long time. We're not talking about a short
Mm.
a commitment. This is a long-term commitment. That's actually a fairly large chunk of her life at this
Mm.
point. And the thing is that over a decade, anything can happen in your life. Imagine
Mm.
that for example, her one of her parents was ill and she had to go back for a year. Well, that would basically put her right at the beginning again, and
Oh my
she would
God.
have to start from scratch. So it would be as if she'd never set foot in the UK. So it's like, until you get that right to remain, any little thing that trips you up could mean that you have to leave, and then you have to leave your home, the life that you've created, and that, I think, that uncertainty of just your physical location, I think, has a huge toll on your kind of mental health. um, I think also I should say that, for me, this has been
Mm.
a journey of discovery, because I had some understanding of the difficulties faced by migrants, but I hadn't until I experienced it personally, and through my wife. I didn't realize just how harsh the system was and how complicated it was. And I think that a lot of
Mm.
people in the UK just don't really understand that it's actually very difficult. And I think that the news makes it out that you just can arrive and then suddenly you're a British citizen. But actually, in reality, it's a long and complicated process, and I think that, if you can't feel settled after more than a decade, um, I think that is just not fair.
Right. And also, you feel like that maybe the country is failing you, and this may not feel like a home, even though the people in it are creating a home for you.
Exactly, and I think that there's something which, I think I've been told by other immigrants, is that when you're away from your homeland for a long time, you don't really feel that you are part of that society anymore. And so if the place that you've been living for more than a decade doesn't make you feel settled, then you don't really you feel in between places. And I think that that I think makes you feel unwelcome.
Well, I'm really sorry for everything that you've gone through, but I guess it takes a lot of courage and maybe a whole lot of love as well to persist in such a system. So, like, going back into the sentiment behind it, how do you think these rising financial barriers affect not just individuals but couples like yourself, where one person is a UK citizen but the other person has to earn their place through repeated visa applications? Um, how do you feel about that process?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the things that couples have maybe most frequent arguments about is money, right? So,
Right.
the fact that the visa system puts an additional financial strain on people inevitably results in more difficulty for those people, right? If you're under financial strain, then your life is less comfortable. Therefore, the government is essentially making it harder for two people who love each other to make a life together. And I think that as well as the normal stresses that life throws at you, you then obviously have a constant feeling that your government is sort of out to get you in a sense. And I think one of the strains for us is that you know um, over this period of time, my wife, felt she wasn't really welcome here, and so for me, I'm trying to, I guess, to sort of make her feel welcome here again, but also trying to convince her that maybe the UK isn't, is still a good place for us to call our home, and
Okay.
she came here with a lot of excitement because the UK was an exciting place to study, good music scene, all of this kind of thing, interesting culture. But then I think over this period of time, it's the way that the immigration system has treated her, I think makes her feel less welcome. And that makes it difficult for us because obviously we live here. I'm from the UK, and so yeah, it obviously causes some kind of additional stresses that don't need to be, that we don't that we wouldn't otherwise have.
So I never thought the UK government would be starring as like the villain, In Disney, when couples have their happily ever afters, there's always this villain who's sabotaging, and it looks like in this case, it is definitely the UK government. So, what
Yeah.
reforms would you advocate if the UK truly wanted to treat skilled migrants as future citizens and not just economic units? Is there an ethical framework or an alternative model you believe that the UK should look forward to?
I mean, in terms of an ethical framework, I think that a famous refugee once said something along the lines of, treat others just as you would like to be treated. If I wanted to live in another country, I would feel upset if it was made impossible for me to live and work where I wanted to work. And I think a lot of people in the UK would also feel the same way. That if they wanted to, for example, retire to Spain, which is a lot of what a lot of British people do, they would feel kind of upset if they were told, no, you can't do this, or that it was so expensive that it was impossible for them to do. And so I think that we just have to try to treat other people as we would like to be treated. And in terms of concrete policy, I don't think we have to look that far to find a better way. First of all, all in Wales and Scotland, in the national parliament, so the Welsh Senate and the Welsh Senate and the Scottish Parliament, like legal residents who are not British citizens are allowed to vote, but that is not the case in the Westminster Parliament. And I think there's like if you are able to vote, then that means that politicians will want to get your vote. And so inevitably it means that politicians are less likely to pursue a harsh immigration policy for the sake of being harsh, because that will alienate potential voters. So I think that giving a greater voice to immigrants would be the first step to reforming our immigration policy. But also across the EU, the cost of a working visa is less than €100 for 3 years, compared with thousands for the same period of time in the UK. And as I have alluded to earlier, migrants are not receiving a service for all that money they're paying. This is just cost for the sake of cost. And I think that we should try to align ourselves better with other comparable European countries. So essentially, there's not a mystery here, right? We just need to align ourselves with our neighbours, whether that's Wales or Scotland in the case of within the UK, or Germany, France, Italy, other countries in the EU, and that would make a huge difference to the way that immigrants feel in the UK, because first of all, they would have a voice, and secondly, they would feel that the costs that they are paying are proportional, because obviously all administration has a cost. I'm not advocating that it should be free, but I think that it should cost what it costs to actually do.
Right. This has been such an interesting discussion, and I thank you for sharing your experience with us. And any closing thoughts?
I suppose that closing thoughts would be that I think that the world is a better place when we share and we see other people in other countries as the same as us, and the world is a better place where we allow people to live and work where they would like to live and work, because ultimately everyone wants to make the best of their life. So yeah, that's my final thought.
Right.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your views. And I hope that your wife is finally successful, even though it's been 13 years long, that, your fairy tale love story comes true, despite the UK government playing the villain that it plays. So thank you so much for joining us today.